I appreciate it. Well, thank you. It's great to be here at Lawrence Tech. And I want to say thank you to the provost for that introduction. But I also want to say thank you to the innovative materials people. And in particular, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Grace. So Dr. Grace, please stand up so we can give you a round of applause. He and his team has done some truly wonderful research. And they're not only just doing research, they're making things real for us that involve actually hopefully bringing companies to Michigan to build businesses, to be successful, and to do true innovation in transportation. And I'm going to show you an example, but you're going to have to wait. I want to build a little suspense for that. What are we here to talk about today? We're here to talk about something that typically doesn't gather a lot of attention: infrastructure. I've done a number of special messages, and I've done them on topics that generate passion out of people. You talk about education, you get people passionate. You talk about local government to local government officials, they get passionate. I did health and wellness, and that all touches us. And I talk about infrastructure, and the first reaction is, huh? But the point about infrastructure is that very comment I just made. It's something we take for granted. And we take it for granted because we rely on it, which makes it critical to our lives. Infrastructure is truly critical to us in at least two capacities. One capacity is the most fundamental. It's about public safety. It's about our safety in terms of transportation, of sewer and water, of things we rely on to make sure we can simply survive and get around. Secondly, though, it's a critical aspect when you're talking about jobs. And we know that the reinvention of Michigan, one of the fundamental issues is the need for more and better jobs. And that's why infrastructure is on the list of topics. And that's why it's such an important topic. So one of the at least minimal things I'd like to do today is really highlight the importance of infrastructure and why it's such an important topic and why we need to pay attention to it as opposed to just simply taking it for granted. Now, when you talk about infrastructure, it could cover a lot. And I'm not going to cover all the topics. We've got a special message here that if you have insomnia, I'm sure we can take care of that tonight if you want to read the entire thing. No, it's a very good message, a lot of good information. But I'm going to highlight two or three pieces. One is the transportation area. The second one is sewer and water. And the third one is a new form of infrastructure, but it's fundamental to our lives, which is broadband. Because I ask you, how many of you, if you would have left without your computer or your phone and found out you forgot it, you would have gone back home because you'd say, I can't live my life today without those devices. So they're all three critical. Now I'm going to take them one at a time, but I would say one thing's true of all of them. We've underinvested in them. We want to take advantage of them, but too often because we take them for granted, they haven't gotten enough attention and enough of our excitement to say they're worth investing in, to make sure we're keeping up with where we need to go for the future. We need to stop living in the past and look towards the future. Now the first one is transportation. And the first line I'll give you is simply a tagline, but I hope it resonates with you because it is important. Better roads drive better jobs. And one of the things we need to do is focus in on our roads and bridges in terms of transportation. And it's something I heard over and over again on the campaign trail. When I talk to people, if you talked about roads and bridges, there's a strong belief, I believe, from almost every citizen in the state that they can be better than they are today. It's very seldom that, I'll ask you, how many people do you know out there are happy about our roads and bridges? That would be quite a Where's Waldo search. And again, that brings the point to say, let's do something about it because of this underinvestment issue. And to put that in illustration for you, I've got a number of charts, and that's why I'm wired up this way so I can walk around a little bit to show you some of these things. And again, they're in the document, a number of these charts. The first one is this chart, which shows federal aid eligible roads and what's in good and fair condition. If you look at it where we're at today, 2010, 2011, we're only at 68% fair or good. And if we continue on our current path of the velocity that we have, the investment rate we're currently looking at, what's going to happen out by 2023? will be at 35%. Now, to the degree you don't like potholes, bumps, orange barrels, at 68%, think about what life would be like at 35%. Another critical aspect I'd mention on this is when you fall out of the category of fair and good, what does it cost to repair a road? To the degree you need to spend $1 to repair a road where it's fair and good, to keep it fair or good, it's one thing. If it falls into the poor category, the equivalent cost can be anywhere from $6 to $14. So as we let anything fall into poor to good to get it into poor to get it back to fair to good, it could be a 6-to-1 relationship. So not only do you go downward here, but if we want to dig out of this hole, it would be a very expensive hole, to highlight the need for real investment. So one of the other things, though, instead of simply talking about spending money, because that's not the critical thing, you know me, and my focus is not about just spending money, it's about showing real results to you, our citizens, our customers, and showing customer service government. It's to show you that resources are going to things that make a real difference. So part of that is also dealing with a belief that many of our citizens have, I believe, is we think we could do a better job. That in terms of the dollars we have, many people believe we haven't always deployed them the best way. So part of it is we need to stand up and say, to the degree we're given precious resources, your tax dollars or other dollars, we need to invest them thoughtfully and show you a real return on your investment. And that's part of this. So the first thing I was going to cover is talk about best practice. And the good part is we actually have been doing a lot of best practice things already in Michigan. The problem is we don't get to see them very often because we've been so under-resourced, we don't get to fully implement the good things that we have already been trying to do. And one illustration is with MDOT, the Michigan Department of Transportation. They've been a leader in life cycle planning. And life cycle planning is the concept of you do a longer-term plan. We do 5-year plans, but even longer-scale planning to say, how do you prioritize what projects are most important to do them the best way? And we've been a leader in that for a long time. Actually, it's a great case. The Congressional Budget Office has looked at it nationally and said, if you do life cycle planning, you can be as much as 40% more efficient in terms of your long-term maintenance costs by doing this methodology. And we've been doing it, but we've been struggling because of lack of dollars. Other illustrations, though, there are technology things. Now, this is the fun part about Dr. Grace and some of the great research. Now, he told me he wouldn't let me handle this earlier, but I picked it up anyway. And what is this? This is a piece of steel. Rebar that you'd find like in a bridge or a road. In particular, I'm going to talk about bridges. And if you wonder why our bridges fall apart, it's not the concrete as the driver. It's the steel rusting out. And steel rusts out, and that's what's been the major cause of failures with our bridges. So this is what we've been doing for a long time, is watching this happen. And I know if I ask many of you here, you've seen this. Now, because of the innovative materials research we have going here, there's something called carbon fiber. And if you could be here, I can tell you, this weighs a fraction of this. I can do a lot of neat tricks with this. This one would be kind of scary, folks. But as a practical matter, carbon fiber is a new material that doesn't rust. It's actually stronger and better. And Dr. Grace, working in partnership here with the university and other people in Japan, have come up with ways to make bridges using this as the core material instead of this. To be open, those bridges cost more day one, but they last a whole lot longer and they cost a whole lot less during their life cycle. We've already done 2 bridges in Michigan with this material, one 10 years ago. So it works. This is the kind of investment we need to show to you, our citizens, that we're going to be smart about the future. Other simple cases that you've already seen, LED lighting. When you look at our lighting systems on the highways and such, it's much more efficient and much better. So there are a lot of good things. Other things, though, that we need to do is look at how we operate. And so I'm going to bring up a topic now that I know has already gotten people's attention because, as any good message does, some stuff has leaked out. Isn't that wonderful? I'm learning about the political world here. And one of those concepts was old ways of doing things need to be revisited. And one of those is the topic of road commissions. For a long time, we've had road commissions around Michigan, and they provided a great function, but the world has changed. Actually, 2 of our largest counties don't have a road commission. They've gone to a different form, Wayne County, Macomb County. And so one of the things, we've created a structure where it's hard to make change happen. So one of the requests I have of the legislature is to make it so counties can absorb the road commissions. They don't have to, but they're going to now be able to have the option to say, we no longer need a road commission. We can do it through the county commission, through an executive structure, some other form to be more efficient, to really reduce redundancies that we have in our system today. And I believe that's a good opportunity to move forward. Now, that's only one illustration of best practice. There's a whole thing of best practice that we're going to be looking at MDOT doing. They're already doing a number of them, but also asking any of our road agencies in the state to do. And one of the most important ones is the idea of open bidding. Really allowing open bidding to happen, which means anytime there's a maintenance contract, other kind of contract, it will go out to bid and anyone can bid on it. And when I say anyone, literally anyone that's qualified. So that could be a surrounding jurisdiction. If you're in a city putting something out to bid, it could be the county bidding on it. It could be a neighboring city, a neighboring county. It could be a private party. It's free competition to let the best people succeed. It could be MDOT or vice versa for an MDOT contract. Open bidding. And we actually plan to look at piloting the concept of actually bidding out construction projects in open bidding. Not just for the construction, but for the maintenance. That was a pilot that happened several years ago, and I know I'll get a question from the media on that. It was piloted a dozen years or so ago, and it didn't go well. Well, we're older and wiser. It's worth trying again. So we're going to look at all kinds of ideas on that in terms of open bidding. But the other things we want to add are things that you have heard before if you've heard my best practice talks. It's about dashboards, about metrics, transparency, and accountability. It's about having the ability to do audits, of having MDOT or other parties come in and help work with jurisdictions on auditing their road operations to be more efficient. And just to show you one illustration, we live what we talk about. We are issuing today a dashboard for infrastructure. And I'll come back and talk about some of these later. But again, it's best practice applying to all of us as partners. Not saying there's a different set of rules for different people, but we're in this together in a positive way. Other things we're going to ask for are the things you've heard about before with road agencies that we haven't asked. 80-20 for health insurance. Again, looking at the traditional reforms. All good stuff. Now, there's another big one, though, that does get back to the money topic. Now, many of you are from the infrastructure community. I've recognized a number of faces here. And when you talk about roads and bridges, it almost always comes back to a famous item called Act 51. And I always wonder why we refer to things as Act 51. I mean, we have this for other acts I've already suffered through in terms of trying to understand what people are talking about. But that was basically the comprehensive way we operate our roads is under this act. The interesting part is no one finishes it because if you ever thought about it, acts are related to a specific year. Because I've already signed Public Act 200 and some into law since I've been in office. So the Act 51 we always talk about, you know what year that act is from? 1951. Boy, we've got some experienced people here. 60 years ago. Now, I hate to say it, but just as a general item, it probably isn't a bad idea to update things once every 60 years or so, right? And one of the reasons I wanted this is you get a question of funding formulas. And I thought I would share with you the Act 51 funding formula for roads in our state. Now, you see this? Well, the part many of you can't see is this. This is the formula under Act 51. Now, many of you know me, and I talk about being a boring accountant. As an accountant, I don't even want to look at this. This is not a good way to do things, folks. There are better ways. So my view is it's time to move away from Act 51 in terms of the funding formula. It is time to say, instead of having politics of the last 60 years define how we do dollars, let's do it on a much more rational basis. And if you come back to the simple prospect of what's a more rational basis, shouldn't it be based on traffic and commercial activity? Something really simple. So the concept here is over an extended period of time, again, not to change things too dramatically, too quickly, but what I would propose over the next 7 years is to look at a transition from this wonderful diagram, which no one wants to go through, to something very simple like this. And this is not the direct proposal, but a concept to basically say, let's do something really simple based on a commercial corridor concept to say it's about traffic and about commercial corridors. And to say we really need to focus on, again, the jobs concept and looking where things are, at the same time recognizing we are a large state. And there are key commercial corridors, because in many respects, if you say traffic, you're going to think urban areas. But this would also take into account that we have key commercial corridors and needs in our rural areas. So we don't disadvantage it one or the other, but we really focus on where traffic is, where commercial activity is, and where our people are living in a very simple fashion. And do it based on roads, not politics. So this is a major part of the presentation. In the interim, one thing I'm also going to suggest, and again, this will gather attention and some concern from people, but as I explain it, you'll see I believe it makes a lot of sense, is we have 617 road agencies in our state today. I didn't say that improperly, 617. That's a lot of different road agencies. And to start on the path, one thing we're suggesting is we'd recommend eliminate funding to the road agencies receiving less than $50,000. And believe me, there are over 100 agencies that receive less than $50,000. Now, we don't want to leave those jurisdictions in trouble, though, over their roads. So when I say eliminate funding for those agencies, we would still designate the dollars for those roads in those communities. So those $50,000 checks would still go to, say, the county road agency, the other road agency that would be the next tier up, and those funds would be designated to take care of the roads in that community. It's the simple fact, I don't believe we need the additional overhead and structure of those agencies in terms of our funding when they're receiving that small amount of money. So that's something that we're going to propose in terms of items. Another thing really gets into the funding model itself, and that gets to the concept of looking at the gas tax and the diesel tax that's on retail. And what I'm proposing is the simple elimination of the retail tax on diesel and gas. What I would say there is it's an antiquated concept also. There are better ways of doing things. And what I would propose as a replacement in a revenue-neutral fashion is to replace it with a tax on fuels at the wholesale level. And why do I bring that up in terms of shifting from a retail tax on gas and diesel to a wholesale tax, particularly when it'd be geared to raise the same amount of money? Well, the idea is a buying power issue over the long term, to be viable for the long term, because if you look at it, the cents per gallon model really has not sustained buying power for what we need, and that's part of our underinvestment problem. And if you look at the special message, there's actually a chart in there that shows you the deterioration in buying power over the last 20 years of those dollars. So it's really built to build a long-term system so we don't have to come back each year to say we need changes in the formula, but here's a formula to last for the long term to deal with an issue that's otherwise very troubling. Now, the biggest single topic I'm going to bring up today that I know can get people's attention is we just need more money for our infrastructure, our roads and bridges. And so what I'm saying today is based on some great work from the legislature, and it's great to have a couple legislators with us. We have Rick Olson here and Tom Casperson, and they've been critical in helping do some of this analysis and this good work over the last few years. They did, in the House, a legislative report that said we needed roughly $1.4 billion more in infrastructure investment for our roads and bridges. I agree with the basic recommendation. So what I'm proposing is we need to find revenue sources to generate $1 billion to $1.4 billion a year for our roads and bridges. Now, the way I'm going to characterize this is I want a public discussion of this issue and a public dialogue. So I'm not proposing a specific proposal to the legislature or a vote of the people at this point, but I would like to have us take a few months to have a public dialogue in a very open fashion to say what are the best ways to raise that kind of revenue, and are people supportive of having that happen? Again, remember what I started with, though. We all don't like our roads, but we have to be able and excited enough to invest in them, to fix them. And I will give you one illustration of what I think is a worthwhile concept to think about, a for example. The for example to raise that funds is one that would go as follows. For example, if we increase state registration fees by $10 per month on the average passenger vehicle, $10 a month, 2 trips to Starbucks, 1 1/3 to McDonald's, something like that, $10 a month, that would raise about $1 billion. And to give you an idea what $1 billion could do, and again, there's a lot of questions on all the pieces, but to give you one illustration, is we redid this chart to say if we had $1 billion to invest in our federal aided roads. Here's the 68% that I showed you on the other chart. The original chart, you can see it went down to 35% on the as is. With that $1 billion investment, not only could we go from 68%, we could increase to 81% good and fair. And we'd be at 90% for our most important arteries, or higher. A tremendous difference for $10 per month for the average passenger vehicle. Now that's about $1 billion. We need to do more than that. But again, in partnership, what I would give you for the second, for example, is to say, let's create an option for our regions, our counties, or groups of counties to come together, to have a local piece of this, to say that they could increase registration fees by up to $40 a year, based on a vote of the people in that region. Now that would raise over $300 million. And that region, that group of counties, or that county could decide, first of all, is it going to happen at all? But what would go to transit? What would go to roads, bridges? Again, they would have flexibility in how to deploy those dollars. If you look at many other states, most states have more road funding at the local level. So this would create that opportunity. So those two, for examples, without telling you that's our proposal, I would say I view that as a good starting point to say let's focus the discussion on those 2 points and have an open dialogue about really stepping up to the plate to say, do we want that or do we want that? So other pieces of that, in terms of looking at the issues, is the question of transit. Because it is critical. And we don't spend enough time talking about our transit issues. And why is transit so critical? Well, first of all, for most of us, we don't think about it, but for a lot of people in our state, that's their lifeline to employment. They depend on a bus, other form of transportation to get them to work. If they don't get to work, they don't have a job. If they don't have a job, it's a terrible situation. So we need to do better with our transit. The second thing is, if we want to revitalize our urban areas, and I believe we're all committed to that, for Michigan to be a great state, Detroit has to be on the path to being a great city, is we need a transit system that really works. And the third piece that goes along with that transit system is, that is one of the main attractors of young people. And I heard that every day on the campaign trail. Besides jobs, it was keeping our kids in the state. So we need to do something on transit. So again, it's to revisit how we do our transit formulas in the state. But one thing in particular is we're already starting the process, and I want to encourage this, about doing a transit system, a new transit system in southeastern Michigan. That's a discussion that's been going on for almost as long as I've been alive. It has not been a positive nor constructive dialogue. We have spent way too much time arguing about legacy systems. The starting point, I believe, is to start fresh, and then we can always come back and talk about those issues. But the fresh starting point I would propose is a key corridor system based on southeastern Michigan with the city of Detroit, the counties of Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Washtenaw, and anyone else that wants to join, but really doing a focus on key corridors to create a really good rapid transit bus system or other transit system connecting those communities. That would be on the main corridors of, say, Woodward, Gratiot, Michigan, and M59. And promoting that. Now, the good part is we got positive encouragement from Secretary LaHood, who was here just a week or so ago. And at his request, and working with us, we agreed to create a task force of those jurisdictions, with the chairs of the committees being Mayor Beng and myself. That's an exciting opportunity, because we do need to do better on transit. We do need to focus on it. Now, there are other forms of transportation we also need to encourage, and again, there are many in the message. I'm just going to highlight a couple. One is the concept of rail. We have a great rail opportunity in our state. First of all, I would start with something that's the backbone of our economy. Our agricultural community has been one of our strongest areas. And we need to make sure they rely on it as a critical need, and there are portions of the state that we can look at continuing to improve and maintain good transportation corridors with rail. But we also have opportunity in passenger rail and commuter rail. Again, tying back into that Southeast Michigan Transit Authority concept and that overview, there is an opportunity to see commuter rail potentially from Ann Arbor all the way around through Detroit through Pontiac. Another topic I would mention, because I want to make sure this is very encompassing in terms of infrastructure, are our ports. One of the emerging opportunities for job creation in our state is actually in the Upper Peninsula, and it's the mining industry. We're getting strong interest in restarting or opening new mines up in the UP, and if you think about it, as they mine that ore, what's one of the best ways to get it out? Through the Great Lakes. And so there's an important opportunity to, again, invest in our ports, including looking at working with the federal delegation on what we can do to add a second 1,000-foot lock up at the Sioux Locks. So there's great opportunity with those items. And then when you talk about international commerce, I'm going to keep it very brief today, but everyone's got to expect me to bring up the bridge. We've had some setbacks, but again, following my philosophy of relentless positive action, we are going to stay relentless because I believe it's in the best interest of all our citizens to work with who I consider one of the, you couldn't find a better partner in the world to partner with our neighbors in Canada and build a bridge to Canada to really enforce our opportunity for new traffic, new job creation, and great international trade. So there's so many good things to talk about there. I am going to switch gears on us now, though, and talk a little bit about sewer and water. And I'm going to highlight the dashboard. You can't read this, but I'm going to highlight a couple of the statistics that the beauty of dashboards is they can tell you when you're doing well, and they can tell you when you're not doing well. And this is what I learned as governor, is by looking at this dashboard, there are some things we don't do well on sewer and water. And one is talking about monitored beaches with no closures or unsafe advisories. We're at 80%. So sometime during the last year, 20% of our beaches were closed, monitored beaches, were closed because of unsafe conditions or they had an advisory. That's not good. Even a larger number is raw sewage discharge in billions of gallons. Over 7 billion gallons of raw sewage. That got my attention. I don't know anyone's attention that you wouldn't get. That's not acceptable. We need to do better. I'm going to save some of the measures for an environmental message, but what I can tell you today that we have in this message is we need to set up programs and implement programs to start addressing those two topics among many others. And we actually have some of the resources to do them. Back in 2002, we, the citizens, passed a bond proposal for $1 billion worth of bond opportunity for these topics. We haven't fully utilized those bond resources. We've got over $600 million available. And you know me, I'm a cheap accountant, so it's not just about spending money, but to do it where it really has a return. And we've had good advice from an advisory group. Other groups have contributed to say, let's set up the programs that can be the framework for the appropriate deployment of those dollars. And they include things such as a grant program for planning to say where should we be doing this to most effectively take care of that 7 billion gallons, for example. And then low-interest loan programs that those proceeds could be used for to also work on how to actually build the facilities or to deal with the remediation or what needs to be done to deal with those issues. More to come on that as we get to the environmental special message. But this is something that, again, we don't think about every day. We take for granted that our sewer and water works well. But I don't believe there's one person in this room that felt real comfortable hearing about 7 billion gallons of raw sewage. The last topic I was going to cover is broadband, because that is one of the infrastructures of the future. And we do need to focus in on that. The good part is we actually have some good stuff going when we looked into it. One of the exciting developments that we already have projects going that is funded already. It's for over 2,000 miles of additional fiber optic connections within the state of Michigan. And one of the great parts, if you look at the map of where they're doing it, they're actually integrating the Mackinac Bridge in the process. So they're going to lay fiber across the Mackinac Bridge, which is really cool to connect both peninsulas in a better way. So we have that project going with the Merit Network, which has been a consortium, historically was a consortium of our research universities. So that's a great project. But there are a couple other specific things we can do. One is we can do one-stop shopping for permits and right-of-ways for the utilities to look at how to lay fiber and other broadband connections. Right now we make it very difficult in terms of the process they go through. So I'm going to ask for legislation to help do one-stop shopping. Another opportunity we have using wireless and other communications is we actually have one of the best public safety networks in the country in terms of our towers for the state police and other public safety utilizers. But what we could do is actually make those towers available at a fair market cost, but for commercial providers and other ISPs to use those towers. That's pre-existing infrastructure. It's already there. It can be leveraged up to provide better service to our citizens and our customers. So I think there's a good opportunity there. So those were the areas. There's a lot of information there. Again, the special message, I want to thank our team. They worked really hard on this. There's a lot of good things. But to put it back in perspective for all of us, I'll come back to where I started. We're used to talking about topics that get us so passionate right out of the gate. You talk about taxes, education, the budget. There's an exciting topic, but it can get fire and passion going. But when you come to this topic, it's what we take for granted. And what we're taking for granted is slipping. And we're a state that wants to move forward, not backward. And it's about building a foundation for our future. And when I say for our future, it's just not for our future. But could anyone feel good about leaving 35% for your kids or your grandkids? It's about the foundation for all our futures. We've ignored this for far too long. It's only about every 20 years that we finally get fired up enough to do something about it. The last time we did anything in terms of road funding was back in the 98 or so, 97. And we just watched. That's not our attitude today. It's about relentless positive action. Let's not walk away from the tough problems. The Michigan of the future is about taking and tackling the tough problems in a positive way. Just coming up with a solution. So we're not going to blame anyone for the mess we got in our infrastructure. Nobody should be taking credit to the degree we succeed. Let's just do this. And let's move forward. Because it's about jobs, our kids, and our safety. Thank you so much.